Steam Greenlight was a very strange time for game developers trying to get their games onto Steam. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of Steam Greenlight and the new Steam Direct system and kind of my thoughts as a game developer on the whole thing. So, hi, I'm Gavin, I'm a indie game developer, and I'm currently working on a game called My Beautiful Paper Smile, and I have been making games since Greenlight was a thing. I submitted multiple games to Steam Greenlight, and I actually got one game all the way through that process, so I can speak on it. Way back when Valve first created Steam, they made it as a website where they could put out their own games. You know, they had their Steam, their Team Fortress, their Dota, all that kind of stuff, right? They had that all on Steam, and pretty soon they opened it up to third-party companies and game developers, and so they'd take submissions from companies and they'd heavily curate everything, right? They'd go through each game individually and decide if they thought it was something that their audience would be interested in. And if they thought it would be a good game, then they'd put it up on their storefront. But eventually, they had an overwhelming demand for games that they didn't think would be good on their storefront, you know? And eventually they just realized, we have no idea what people want anymore. And so they created this system called Steam Greenlight, which was a part of the Steam platform where developers would submit a game. You know, they'd have their trailer, screenshots, you know, a description, you know, basically they'd put out all the information that somebody would need to know about their game, and then people would vote either yes or no as to whether or not they thought that game would be good on Steam and if they would buy it if it was available. And if a game got enough yes votes, then Valve would greenlight that title and give them access to the full Steam backend and give them basically the ability to publish that game on Steam. But Steam opening up these floodgates kind of allowed for a lot of strange things to start happening, because one, you've got random developers from all over the world submitting their games, and you also have random players from all over the world basically judging all of these titles. And so you'd have unqualified judges and unqualified games just mixing between each other in a system that maybe wasn't as polished as it could have been. And the result was, it was just interesting. It was interesting, to say the least. You know, there were multiple cases of, you know, developers who would just like buy an asset pack off of, you know, the Unity store or whatever and package it up as a game and then just try to pitch it to people on Steam Greenlight. And sometimes these games actually got through and actually got onto the Steam store, which I don't know if that's the result of people troll voting, yes, or what the deal was, or if people actually thought that these were legitimate good games. I have no clue. You know, a lot of times developers, if their game didn't get greenlit in the first, you know, week or so, they would resubmit it, and then you'd have all these people jumping on them for resubmitting a game. Like, people were paying attention. That's part of what is so fascinating to me, is the community involvement. I guess that's what you'd call it. Basically, if a developer messed up in any way, if you stepped out of line, right, by the unspoken rules of the Steam community, you would be dogpiled by people. So if you resubmitted a game, dogpile. If you deleted a single comment, because Steam actually gave developers the option to delete comments, which is presumably because there were a lot of trolls. There were a lot of people being very mean to developers. Some deserved, but a lot of it wasn't deserved at all, and people would just get trolled, and so Valve gave people the option to delete comments. But if you deleted a comment, somehow everybody would know. Everybody would notice that you deleted a comment, and you just get spammed with people telling you, oh, he's deleting comments, oh, he's a terrible person, oh, this developer hates their fans, or, you know, whatever. And this is actually something that happened to me. I submitted my game. I don't even want to say what it's called. I submitted a game. It was really bad, and it actually got through the Greenlight process. And there was one point where some comment got removed, not by me. I'm assuming it was some kind of an auto moderation thing, or Valve manually removed it maybe. I can only assume that it was so profane that they just automatically removed it. And in any case, a bunch of people thought that I had removed the comment, and so they jumped on me saying, he's deleting comments, this guy, downvote him faster, stuff like this. So and that wasn't even me, and this happened to lots and lots of people. So it was a little bit discouraging. Honestly, Greenlight was probably, that was like your initiation as an indie game developer. You could put your games on Steam, not Steam. You could put your games on itch.io. People were usually pretty supportive, or they just didn't say anything. You could put your games on forums, on Twitter, on Reddit, and usually people were generally nice, right? But as soon as you put a game on Steam Greenlight, that is the point of reckoning. So it was interesting. But like I said, some of these developers really did deserve it. I mean, you had some people resubmitting asset flips for weeks on end, and some people just were like, all they would do is submit asset flips. Or they would, sometimes what you'd see is you'd see a game where it's like super duper shooter, First Blood, right? And then on the same day you'd have like a sequel and a prequel, and you get like a full trilogy of games submitted in the within an hour of each other, and it's basically every single one is the exact same game, just with a different title. So you'd see a lot of strange stuff like that. Now, I have a feeling that Valve probably could have improved the Greenlight system a little bit. Maybe if they'd made it so that only curators could vote on games, or if they'd just put Greenlight on a separate site so it's not as easy for just random users to get to. Maybe that would have helped with the trolling problems, or maybe if they'd had, because basically the way it worked is a developer would pay $100 and then they'd basically get full access to submit as many games as they wanted to Steam Greenlight. So maybe a better system would have been you pay $25 for every game that you want to submit, or you pay $100 for every game that you want to submit, or just something like that, so that there's a little bit of a barrier to entry, for both parties. But ultimately, Valve thought about all this stuff, and they came to the conclusion that it would be best to just use a completely new system called Steam Direct. I think, right? Now that I'm saying it out loud, it doesn't sound right. But yeah, I think that's what it's called. So they got rid of Steam Greenlight and replaced it with a system similar to like the App Store and the Google Play Store, where you just submit a game, and as long as it's not a virus, and as long as it actually runs, then you'll get accepted onto Steam. And some people were really worried, and some people were really excited. So you had a group of people who were like, oh no, now the Steam store is going to get flooded with all these trashy games. And then you had all these other people who were like, yay, now we don't have all these trashy games on Greenlight. But then basically all the trashy games moved from Greenlight to the actual Steam storefront. However, this actually didn't end up being as big of a problem as people might think. And I think I might be okay with the decision. Because basically, as long as you have crappy games on a storefront, as long as people don't see the crappy games, then your storefront might as well still be high quality. People were really worried that their, recommended games and all this stuff would just be flooded with all this trash and asset flips. And while all those games are still on Steam, Valve has done a pretty good job of actually recommending titles to players that they're actually interested in, and promoting stuff that's actually selling well and converting well for players. So stuff that people are genuinely interested in. And, Steam has made a few decisions at some points that made a lot of indie developers kind of pissed off. Stuff like back about a year ago, 2 years ago, they had a system where if your the tags on your game were similar to the tags on another game, then you could show up in the more like this section of that game's page. And a lot of indie games would show up in those spaces. So like, for example, for a time I was on the more like this page of like Little Nightmares and a bunch of other like fairly popular horror games. I think even maybe one of the FNAF games, but I'm not certain. And that got me a lot of traffic. But later on, they changed it so that tags basically just promote games that are already selling well, rather than games that correlate best to the tags. So a lot of people got really mad about that, and they're like, oh, this isn't indie friendly at all. And that's true. It's not, because Steam is a business and they're trying to make money, which you really can't blame them for. If Steam stocked all of their basically ad space, right? Every single area where they could show a game to a player, if they stacked that with really crappy games, then they would make a lot less money than if they're promoting games that they already know will sell well. So basically, you just need to make a game that'll sell well. I'm still trying to figure that out. I think we all are, but that's the system. You know, it's not indie-centric. You know, they're not trying to make all of us indie developers millionaires. You can't blame them. But they're also not against indies, and that's what I think is really cool. You know, I think they've really shown that through the recent, you know, Steam Game Festival's launch. You know, over the past close to a year now, I think they've been doing the Steam Game Festivals where they show a bunch of really cool demos for indie games, and that can get people a lot of attention, you know, for small games that you might not have found otherwise. You know, they're doing stuff like the community recommends, so games that have been getting a lot of good recommendations lately, and a lot of times you find really weird, obscure little indie games on these sections of Steam, and I'm pretty happy with the direction things have been going, to be honest. You know, ultimately, I think it's giving a fair chance to every single developer out there, because, you know, there's a lot of people out there making, you know, like meme games and stuff that you wouldn't think would sell well, but some people really like that kind of thing. And so by using Steam Direct, they're allowing all those games to have a fair shot, and as long as they, you know, convert views into sales well enough, they'll get the promotion that they deserve. So that's really the biggest thing. I guess if you're an indie game developer watching, you know, just make sure whatever game you're making converts well. That's like the most important statistic, is how many people that view this product are going to buy it. So just make sure that you're converting people well, and Steam will do the rest of the work for you. So, you know, Steam is not indie centric, but they're indie friendly. So if you make a good game, they will promote it. But yeah, that was Steam Greenlight. It was a strange time. Although there are a few things about it that were kind of nice. Like, for example, it allowed you to get a lot of views for your game before you had even launched, right? So let's say your game was doing really well and a lot of people were really liking how it looked on Steam Greenlight. For one, you'd get, you know, 2,000-3,000 views on your page. But oftentimes, you know, big news outlets would pick it up. You know, sometimes you'd get articles about the best new games coming to Steam, you know, and they'd be showing games that were on Steam Greenlight. So ultimately, that was the rise and fall of Steam Greenlight. I don't know too much else to say about it. Just that it was an interesting time for Steam and an interesting time for indie game developers. But it's gone now. They've got a different system, and, you know, with the discoverability stuff that they've put in place, I think it's kind of okay. All in all. I think in the first year or so after removing Steam Greenlight, I think some people, at least I kind of missed it. I was like, man, I wish that they kind of had Steam Greenlight still. But I think they've since remedied a lot of the issues that they had with it, and things are looking pretty good. So that's about all I had for you guys today. I just wanted to talk about that because I thought it was interesting, and that's it. So I'll see you guys in the next one.